Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship in one accord. Every praise, every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God. Glory, hallelujah, is due our God. Every praise is to our God. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship in one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah to our God. Glory, hallelujah, is due our God. Every praise is to our God. We give him every praise. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship in one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God. Glory, hallelujah, is to our God. Every praise is to our God. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship in one accord. Every praise
afraid. That's one for each and every day of the year. God's trying to tell us something.
Jesus. Sister Joseph, I want you guys to sing that again here in just a moment. We're gonna ask if you have a need, we want you to come and let the elders pray with you. I'm gonna read some needs here, but we're just gonna thank the Lord in advance. We're not gonna be afraid, but we're gonna have faith because we know that when He is on our side, that He will fight for us. He will be our strength. He will be our comfort in the midst of the struggle. Tonight for healing, let's remember Brother Don Tucker, Chuck Dunn, Caleb Conrad, Elder Brian Murphy Jr., Sister Diana Todd, Sister Norma McLean, Virginia Merriman, Amira, Robin Merriman, Colby Bevins, and Jesse Spear. For other and unspoken, let's remember Verna and Cecil Welch, Sissy and Jeff Cutlip, Revival and Souls, the United States, and Israel. Amen. We serve a God today that is in control. I don't think you heard me. God is in control in your life. God is in control of your situation. If you have a need, I want you to come and let the elders pray with you. Folks, we're not going to be afraid, but we're going to trust in God. God, I thank you for what you're doing in my life. I thank you, Lord God, in advance for taking care of me. And God, I choose to not be afraid tonight, but I choose to know that you are in control of my life. I choose to know that you are in control of my situation. And I cast all my cares, all my worries and my fears upon you, knowing, Lord, that when they are in your hand, that there will be victory. Knowing that when they're in your hand, God, miracles can happen and the impossible will happen. And I thank you in advance tonight for what you're doing. I thank you in advance tonight for victory and healing and deliverance all across this room. In the name of Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Hallelujah, Jesus.
Keep the promises you made. There isn't one that is delayed. So I will not lose heart. Here I will lift my arms and start to
So good to see our guests here tonight. And I am weeping tears of joy over the touch of God. Sister Jennifer came up to be prayed for. So wonderful to see the outpouring of the Holy Ghost as she spoke with tongues here. And I have prayed a hedge of protection about her, pleading the blood of Jesus as a hedge of protection about her. Sister Jennifer, we love you. And this is your place in the kingdom of God. Amen, we encourage you to be faithful and be part of us. Amen. Let's welcome all of our guests here tonight. Praise God. Hallelujah. Oh, what a precious touch of God's Spirit here. And we want to flow right into our worship and giving tonight. And as we do, we will fellowship and greet those guests that are here. Let's thank the Lord that He's blessed us to be able to give. Amen. Praise God. Hallelujah, Jesus. Amen. Lord, thank you. Thank you for the privilege to stand in your presence. Thank you for the privilege to participate by faith and worship in every area of our life, including in finances and giving. And I pray, Lord, as we enter into this aspect of our worship, that your blessing to abide and continue upon us. Equip us, Lord, for the work at hand. Strengthen our hand for the work, and grant to us, Lord, to do exploits for your kingdom, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Come, let's march and give and fellowship as we do.
What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace of mind, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms.
to see Brother Bernard Gillespie and Sister Gail Gillespie with us. Amen. Praise. Let's worship with these singers as they minister in song. And I do want to say again, as I say often, thank you to them, to our musicians and singers for the wonderful blessing that they are to us. And this anointing that you feel is God responding to their prayer, their practice, their dedication, and their desire not to perform in front of us, but to lead us into the presence of God. So let's join with them in worship tonight.
There's not a mountain too tall. There's not a problem so small that Jesus can't resolve. In time he'll get involved. Our God, he cares about us. So wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord, and he'll renew your strength.
Let's take a couple of moments right now to just wait on the Lord. Turn to your neighbor and tell them the young men are going to falter. They're going to lose their strength. Tell them the young lions are going to run out of energy. Turn to your neighbor and tell them that those that wait upon the Lord are going to renew their strength. My goodness. I want to ask Brother Bud and Sister Sherry if they will come. And we want to take a couple of moments to prepare your understanding regarding this. God bless you as you're seated. If you would, go ahead and put my title for tonight up. The Lord laid this message upon my heart titled, The Return. And the very same day, Brother Bud and Sister Sherry came with this urn or vessel here with a plan for us to pray for prodigals that they would return and to pray for other people to be blessed in important ways. And I want to ask them to come and talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing.
Praise the Lord, church. How many has unsaved loved ones in their family, at their job place, everywhere? What we want to do very quickly is just to explain. We've kind of, I guess we borrowed this idea off of a couple of other churches. But what we want to do is after church tonight, come and we have note cards. Any unsaved loved ones in your home, your extended family, anywhere, folks at work or wherever, we want to put their names on a card. We're going to drop them in this bowl, glass bowl. And what we're going to do is every other service or so, we're going to pray over this. And this bowl with the names in it. And we believe the Suttons today that said that they had done this in Tennessee, and they were able to, the weeks after, they were able to take the cards, some of the cards out and tear them up, because God had brought the person back. And that's our goal, is to have backsliders and prodigals and unsaved loved ones and unsaved people that we get around to come back to God and fill these seats. This is where they should be. And so after church tonight and the coming services, please take advantage, get a card, sign, put a name on it, and we're going to pray over it, just believing that God will do what He said He would do and bring our unsaved loved ones back. And the backsliders who belong here, He will bring them back if we pray in faith, believing. Amen?
I'd like to ask you to turn with me in your Bibles. I'll be reading in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I'll be doing a little more extensive reading later on. But for starters tonight, I'd like to ask you to turn with me in the Old Testament to Ezekiel. And I'll be reading first in the New Testament. We'll be going later to Ezekiel 36. But I'd like to read for you in the New Testament first from 2 Corinthians chapter 6. 2 Corinthians chapter 6. And I'll be reading there about 4 or 5 verses. I want to start in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 7. And the word of the Lord through the writing of the Apostle Paul says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Wherefore we labor that whether present or absent, we may be accepted of him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad." There is a day of reckoning coming. And for the faithful believer, that day will be glorious and wonderful. But for the wayward, for the wicked, for the unbeliever, and for the backslider, it will be a time of terrible judgment. And one last verse in verse 14, 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 14. "For the love of Christ constraineth us, because we thus judge, that if one died for all, then were all dead." And then if you'll turn with me to Ezekiel chapter 36. And I want to read there beginning with verse 24, Ezekiel chapter 36, beginning with verse 24. God writing to the Jewish people, to the Hebrew people, "For I will take you from among the heathen and gather you out of all countries, and I will bring you into your own land. Then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness, and from all your idols will I cleanse you. And a new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and ye shall keep my judgments and do them. And ye shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and ye shall be my people, and I will be your God." Again, my title tonight is The Return. I want to ask you to join me in seeking the Lord in prayer for his help during the delivery of the preached word of God tonight. Lord, strengthen our hands and do a surgery, Lord, upon our hearts. Lord, I pray, quicken us by your holy presence and your immense power tonight. Lord, let your limitless glory and your amazing plan be revealed before our very eyes and made known to our hearts tonight, I pray. In the glorious and matchless name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. As we're seated, let's give a great shout of praise to the Lord tonight. Amen. You see on the screen a depiction of a stony heart being broken up and transformed into a fleshly heart. I want to start right at the outset to tell you that I stand with Israel, and I stand against a false doctrine among a litany of Christian church organizations and Christian churches, a false doctrine known as replacement theology. I'm wearing a tie tonight that is covered from one end to the other with Star of David emblems. I want to say thank you to Sister Ashley Fout, who during her recent trip to Israel brought my wife a scarf from Israel and brought to me 2 gifts that I would be able to wear as a small hint or sign of my support for Israel. Years ago, Bishop David Hudson, who before his death served as my pastor, as he was pastor to many. Bishop David Hudson had a pair of cufflinks that had Star of David emblem on them, and he gave them as a gift to Victor Stiersky. And several years ago, as I led the bus group trip to the annual summit of Christians United for Israel, it was the year we were striving to try to stem the tide and turn away the president's hand from enacting by his own executive order and not by treaty, as the Constitution would call for, trying to execute by his own hand as president a non-binding agreement of the U.S. to a horrific Iran nuclear deal. I will tell you that when a president doesn't follow the right proper path and do it as a treaty, then it is not binding. And another president can undo a previous president's executive orders very easily. All he has to do is issue another executive order. And I'm thankful to tell you that our current president has undone what the previous president done in removing us from the horrific Iran nuclear deal. It did not stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. It merely paved a delayed path for them to get nuclear weapons. And Iran and Iran's leaders have now declared Israel, the state they hate, to be a one-bomb state. It is a one-bomb nation. To the enemies of Israel, to the haters of the Jews, they look at the fulfillment of prophecy that God saying he would bring the Jews from every nation back to their land. They look at the fulfillment of that prophecy as an opportunity to wipe them out all in one place at one time. A one-bomb nation. I stand before you to say that I will do everything in my power to keep Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. You say, oh, you're just one man, what can you do? Well, I just happen to be friends with this creator of the universe, and I can talk to him, and he can do some stuff. And I'm also friends with the state of Israel, and they can do some stuff. You may not be aware that several years ago, Iran was quite a far ways along the way toward nuclear weapon development. And suddenly, a precision strike took out all of their implementations. And no one knows for sure, but it is highly suspected that that was the Israeli Defense Force that launched that attack. I will tell you that not only does the vast majority of Americans not want the Ayatollah Khomeini, the radical mullahs that have a stranglehold on Iran, not only does the average American not want them to ever get nuclear weapons, because they not only chant death to Israel, but also death to America. Not only that, but Israel is determined they will not get nuclear weapons. And Israel will act even if they have to act unilaterally. But in this atmosphere in which the haters hate, and we are seeing unprecedented hatred against Jews in this current day and age, it is like 1939 all over again. I recently read where that Jews are being assaulted and attacked and persecuted every week and sometimes every day in places in Europe and even in America, especially in New York and other large cities. There are now Jews who have to be Jews in hiding, because if they walk out on the street dressed as a Jew, someone will pull the car over and get out and begin to beat them up, even if they are elderly. I actually watched a video where someone driving down the road pulled their car over, slammed on the brakes, and jumped out just so they could beat up an old man because they could tell he was a Jew by the way he was dressed. So I want to bring to you a brief rebuttal against this false doctrine called replacement theology. In a nutshell, replacement theology says that the Jews broke their covenant with God, and because they broke their covenant with God, God then turned away from them, and God turned toward the Gentile believers, and that the Gentile church, the Gentile bride, has become a replacement, and that God will give to us all of the promises he had made to them. Or let me put it to you another way. Replacement theology is a false doctrine that says that God is a promise-breaking God. When you look at the promises that God made, including the ones that I read for you here tonight, and I will read more from this, and I will read also from Jeremiah 31, but it is not just in those chapters, but all through the Bible, there are places where God said, I'm going to bring the Jewish people back. Not just an economic return, and not just a physical relocation, and not just a repurposing of the land that he gave to their fathers, but bringing them back, including spiritual restoration and renewal. And as you read tonight, he said, I'm going to do a heart transplant. I'm going to take out the stony heart of the Jewish people and give you a heart of flesh, and I'm going to put my spirit within you, and I'm going to cleanse you from your filthiness. So we're talking about a physical relocation, a physical renewal, an economic and physical renewal, and we are talking about a spiritual renewal. God made up his mind before the dawn of time that even though the Jewish people did not keep their covenant and broke their covenant, that God, for his part, was still going to keep the covenant, even if it meant he had to implement it anew. I'm glad to tell you that God is a promise-keeping God. And the good news of the New Testament is not that we have replaced natural Israel. The good news of the New Testament is that although we have no standing and no right to make any demands, God looks to the heathen Gentile nations and says, if you'll believe and if you'll repent, I'll make access for you into my kingdom also. What fool would say, if this platform tonight represented the kingdom of God, and this stair represented a place for all the Jews returning from around all the world, regaining access to the kingdom, regaining access to a newly re-implemented covenant with God, and this stairwell represented access to that same new covenant for non-Jewish heathen peoples, what fool would stand at that stair and say, I refuse to enter unless, God, you stop all of them from entering. I refuse to be blessed unless none of them can be blessed. There's a word for that. It's called Jew hatred. And it is a horrible false doctrine. The fact of the matter is that we are a whole lot like Mephibosheth. You remember him when there was an attack against the royal family and all of the royal sons were being slain, and he was but an infant, a handmaid trying to get him away and spare his life, trying to escape with him. She picked up the little baby and ran, and somehow she stumbled, and as she fell, she dropped that baby, and it broke his back, and Mephibosheth was crippled for life. Now watch this. He was crippled because of his identity. He was crippled because of who he was. But he was also crippled because of events beyond his control. Now think about your sin curse. Your sin curse has to do with Adam sinning in the Garden of Eden. It has to do with events beyond your control. But it also has to do with your identity, with who you are. The heathen Gentile peoples of the world are born under a curse, and they live under a curse. They are spiritually crippled and spiritually dead all of their life because of who they are and because of events beyond their control. Can you imagine when King David, out of a desire to show mercy to the house of the former King Saul who tried to kill him, and he said, is there anyone left of the former royal house? Is there anyone from Saul's house still alive that I can show kindness to him? And they said, well, there's this crippled man. And David said, go fetch him. He is going to have a place at my table. He is going to eat at the king's table. Folks, that's us. We have no access. We have no right. We have no claim. We have no demand. We have no standing. We are cursed by our birth, from our identity, and by actions beyond our control. And yet the King of Kings says, go fetch those heathen peoples. If they'll come, if they'll repent, if they'll believe, I will grant them a seat at the king's table. How foolish would Mephibosheth be to show up and say, well, King, I'll eat at your table, but only if you make everybody else leave the table. No, I think the king can keep his promise to everybody else at the table and add a new promise for Mephibosheth as well. There is no need of a crazy, unbiblical, false doctrine of replacement. We don't replace them. We're just granted a seat at the table in the kingdom with them. That's Bible truth. You may not understand it, you may not like it, but if you study it, you'll find that is the reality of a grand scheme across all of history that is the plan and mind of God. I want to read for you from Jeremiah 31, and I'll be coming back to Ezekiel. In Jeremiah 31, God, speaking through the prophet Jeremiah, writing to the Jewish people about the new covenant. And we love to read this and we love to quote it as applying to ourselves. You are a secondary audience. The heathen Gentile peoples are a secondary audience. The primary recipient of this book of prophecy is natural Israel. It is the Hebrew people, the Jewish people. In Jeremiah chapter 31, beginning with verse 27, and you can read from verse 15 onward about God's mercy, but beginning with verse 27 as an implementation of his mercy, not because the Jews deserved it, not because the Jews kept up their end of the bargain, but simply out of God's mercy and out of God's desire to keep unbroken his unconditional promise to Abraham. This is what the Lord says, verse 27, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and with the seed of beast. Now, I just want to pause here and say, when you read that verse, you need to have in mind the land. Remember in the previous reading in Ezekiel where God said, I'm going to bring you out of all the heathen nations and I'm going to bring you back to the land that I gave to your forefathers. When Israel is gone from the land is left in desolation. When Israel is gone from the land, there is no one cleaning out the ditches. When the people of Israel is gone from the land that is promised to them and is given to them by God, there is no one breaking up the log jams in the streams and in the rivers. And because no one's cleaning out the ditches and no one is breaking up the log jams, the water piles up where it shouldn't, and what should be wonderful land for crops turns into malaria-infested swamp. And there is neither man nor beast. It's interesting. You give a worthless sand dune to anybody but a Jew and it stays a worthless sand dune. You give a worthless sand, you sell at a ridiculous price worthless sand dunes to Jewish people and they turn it into the most wonderful modern city of Tel Aviv that you've ever seen. You give malaria-infested swampland to anybody but a Jew and it stays as malaria-infested swampland. But you sell at a ridiculously high price malaria-infested swampland to Jewish people and they turn it into wonderful farmland that you see in Israel right now today. And so when you read this, that God said, just like a farmer planting seed, God said, I am going to sow seed. I am going to plant seed in the land of man and beast. In other words, I am going to orchestrate the return. And speaking of this, he says in verse 28, and it shall come to pass that like as I have watched over them to pluck up and to break down and to throw down and to destroy and to afflict, so will I watch over them to build and to plant, saith the Lord. In those days they shall say no more, the fathers have eaten a sour grape and the children's teeth are set on edge. Or in other words, no more are we suffering because of curse caused by events beyond our control from someone other than us. But verse 30, but everyone shall die for his own iniquity, and every man that eateth a sour grape, his teeth shall be set on edge. Verse 31, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a covenant with the heathen Gentile nations. No, it's not what it said. I will make a covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. Somebody realize when he grants this new covenant, it won't be because they kept the old one. It's in spite of the fact they broke the old one, because even if they were promise breakers, God is a promise keeper. Verse 33, but this shall be. Folks, that's not a this may be, this can be, this might be. This is a declaration from God on behalf of his own power. This shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord. For they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. Watch this. And I will remember their sins no more. Who are we talking about? The house of Israel. This mic is a little hot. If you can bring it down, I'm getting a little bit of a ring up here. Thank you. Who are we talking about? Folks, we're talking about the house of Israel. Now, I have good news for you. The good news is that God says to us, Gentile heathen peoples, even though you're not the house of Israel, and even though you're not the Hebrew people, if you would like to, you can put your feet under the table and you can get in on this covenant. Praise God. What fool would stand at the door and say, okay, but only as those filthy Jews get out and leave, would you have to be some kind of idiot? I don't want them to leave. I just want to be able to sit at the table with them and eat food at the king's table. Verse 35, thus saith the Lord which giveth the Son. Watch this. Watch the surety that God ties this promise to. Thus saith the Lord which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Folks, let me ask you something. Did you happen to see the sun shining today? Did anybody happen to see moon and stars on any recent night? Folks, if you still see the moon and you still see the stars and you still see the sun, that means that Israel is still standing as a nation before God to this day. Verse 37, thus saith the Lord, If heaven above can be measured and the foundation of earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off the seed of Israel for all they have done, saith the Lord. In other words, folks, that's a rhetorical thing. You cannot measure the heavens nor measure out the foundations of the earth. Therefore, Israel is not going to be cast off. Verse 38, behold, the days come, saith the Lord. Watch this. Remember what I was saying about the land being desolate when they're gone and being rebuilt when it's repopulated when they return? Behold, the days, saith the Lord, the days come, saith the Lord, that the city shall be built to the Lord from the tower of Hananel unto the gate of the corner, and the measuring line shall yet go forth over against it upon the hill of Gareb, and shall compass about to Goath, and the whole valley of the dead bodies and of the ashes and all the fields unto the brook of Kidron, unto the corner of the horse gate toward the east, shall be holy unto the Lord. It shall not be plucked up nor thrown down anymore forever. Now, folks, one of the reasons why we as Gentile believers look at people and say, well, heaven is a real place, is because heaven is described in Scripture as a real place. We are told exactly how it is laid out. We are told exactly what its walls are made of, exactly what its gates are made of, exactly what its streets are made of. We are told its dimensions, how wide it is, how broad it is, how tall it is. And we look at that and say, that's not the language of metaphor, that's the specificity of reality. Well, using the same rule, we have to look at this and say, this is not God just speaking in metaphor. God is getting GPS specific on exactly where they will be living when He brings them back. And I will say to you, I've been to this very spot on the earth, and I have seen with my own eyes the fulfillment of prophecy as the land has been sown with man and with beast. I want to take you back to Ezekiel 36. And in Ezekiel 36, I want to direct your attention to the land. The land is inseparable from God's promise to the Jews. God's promise was not just, I'll bring you back, nebulous, back to where, from where to what. It's very specific. I'm going to bring you back from the nations where you have been scattered to the land that was given to your forefathers. God is GPS specific about the promise. And it always involves the land. You cannot separate God's promise to the Jewish people from the land. If you do so, you attempt to make God a promise-breaking God. He is a promise-keeping God. So in this, some have wrongly supposed that when they read about natural Israel, that they're reading, Gentile heathens have supposed that when they read about natural Israel and promises to natural Israel, that they have somehow replaced natural Israel, that God is a promise-breaking God, that He will break all of the promise He made, and that somehow they will become the new recipient of all those promises, and so they reckon themselves as replacements of the Jewish people. I would like to ask you tonight to consider the fact that just as the land lays desolate when the Jews are scattered from it, I will tell you that territory that ought to be church property lays desolate when prodigals are scattered in backslidden states from it. And just as God bringing the Jews home to their land causes the land to be blessed and to flourish and to be cared for and to become prosperous, there is territory that ought to be church property, but it's not. But when the prodigals begin to come home, God will begin to develop our land, so to speak. And in this, I want to ask you not to see yourself as a replacement for the Jewish people. See yourself as a remnant waiting for the return of the prodigals. Now, we know that God will not overrule a person's free will. God chose from before the creation of the universe that He would respect free will. God's respect of free will is so unassailable that God will even tolerate an angel, a top leading angel, backsliding, turning against God, and leading other angels in a rebellion against him. Yes, even angels have free will. And so, Lucifer, the son of the morning, chief among the angels, falls into sin using his free will. And even at the dawn of the creation of man, Adam and Eve used their free will to choose to sin. God honors free will. God is so determined to honor free will that even when that free will is evil beyond the description of words, even when that free will is exercised by Nazis in a Holocaust against the Jews, even when that free will is Hitler's, God honors free will. It's scary how much God honors free will. I just want to say something about demonic possession. Demonic possession is a deceptive effort by the devil to rob you of your free will. If God respects your free will beyond the description of words, you ought to respect your free will beyond the description of words. And if demonic forces are trying to manipulate you and pin you down and oppress you and possess you, you need to rise up and say, no, I refuse to let you take my free will. God granted it to me and I will not let you take it away. Folks, you realize that Gadarenian demoniac had thousands of demons in him. And yet when the Lord Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, stepped on the shores of Gadara, thousands of demons could not stop that man from getting to Jesus. One step after another until the Bible says he ran. He didn't have the Holy Ghost baptism. He didn't have the name of Jesus. You do. If that man can run to Jesus, no devil in hell can stop you from getting to Jesus. And in seeing yourself, I'm speaking in a metaphor here, but in seeing yourself as the remnant possessing the wilderness land that is lying desolate because the prodigals and the unsaved that ought to be here are not. I want to read for you from Ezekiel 36, a passage in which God prophesies not to the Jewish people, he prophesies to the land. This is amazing. God is talking to dirt. God is talking to rocks. God is talking to mountains and to hills and valleys and rivers. He's talking to them like they're people. In Ezekiel 36, beginning with verse 8, but ye, O mountains of Israel. Now before I start reading that, let me back off and read a little bit about all that these mountains have suffered in desolation while the land lay desolate because the Jewish people were in exile. Verse 36, verse 1, and thou, son of man, prophesy unto the mountains of Israel, and say, ye mountains of Israel, hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, the enemy hath said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord God, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen. Hey, wait a minute. If you want to find yourself in this passage, that might be where you could find yourself, residue of the heathen. And ye are taken up in the lips of talkers. I will tell you this, God talks, but he doesn't just talk. God's a doer. Some people talk a lot, and that's all they do is talk. In the lips of the talkers, and are an infamy among the people. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God to the mountains and to the hills, to the rivers and to the valleys, to the desolate wastes and to the cities that are forsaken. which became a prey and derision to the residue of the heathen that are round about. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken unto the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, and cast it out for a prey. Prophesy therefore concerning the land of Israel, and say unto the mountains, and to the hills, and to the rivers, and to the valleys, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I have spoken in my jealousy and in my fury, because ye have borne, he's talking about the land, the mountains, the rivers, the valleys, ye have borne the shame of the heathen. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I have lifted up mine hand. Surely the heathen that are about you, they shall bear their shame. But ye, O mountains of Israel, ye shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people of Israel, for they are at hand to come. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn unto you, and ye shall be tilled and sown, and I will multiply men upon you, all the house of Israel, even all of it, and the cities shall be inhabited, and the wastes shall be builded. And I will multiply upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and bring fruit. And I will settle you after your old estates. And I will do better unto you than at your beginnings. And ye shall know, mountains shall know, valleys shall know, dirt, rocks, and rivers shall know. How does dirt know anything? But somehow it's possible. He said to the dirt, ye shall know that I am the Lord. Isn't it amazing that dirt can know who God is and some people are too dumb to know who God is? I think that actually qualifies you for being dumber than dirt. I'll tell you, chief among the list of dumber than dirt is the atheist. I don't have to call him a fool. The scripture calls him a fool. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. You know what you are when you say there is no God? You are dumber than dirt. I didn't say it, folks. That's what the scripture said. Verse 12. Yea. This is the sign, y'all. No, sometimes they see, but they just, surely not. No, this is the sign. Yea, I will cause men to walk upon you, even my people Israel. Verse 12. And they shall possess thee. God's making a promise, not just to the Hebrew people. He's making a promise to their land. They shall possess thee. And thou shalt be their inheritance. And thou shalt no more henceforth bereave them of men. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, they say unto you, the land devoureth up men. It's a bunch of malaria-infested swampland and sand dunes and worthless desert wasteland, and hast bereaved the nations. Oh, how woe is the nations. They've been bereaved by some wasteland over in a corner of the near Middle East. Therefore thou shalt, talking to the land, thou shalt devour men no more, neither bereave thy nations anymore, saith the Lord God. Neither will I cause men to hear in thee the shame of the heathen anymore. Neither shalt thou bear the reproach of the people anymore. Neither shalt thou cause thy nations to fall anymore, saith the Lord. Moreover, as though God hadn't already said enough, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their own way and by their own doings. Their way was before me as an uncleanness of a removed woman. Folks, if anybody tells you that the only way the Jews can come back is when they earn it and deserve it, they're not reading the scripture. I can show you a place in the scripture where God said, I will not do this because of your sake and because of what you have done. I will do it for my own name's sake. If you get nothing else from this message tonight, get this. God is a promise-keeping God. And watch this. What kind of God do you want to serve? If you want to serve a God who will break his promise to the Jewish people, what's stopping him from breaking his promise to you? Our trust in God is not that he broke his promise to someone else to give it to us. Our trust in him is, Lord, we see you're a promise-keeping God. You said you'd make Israel a nation again. You said you'd bring the people back. There are silver-haired saints in our church that have seen that promise fulfilled right in their lifetime. 1948, Israel becomes a state again. And we have seen the return of the Jewish people from all around the world to Israel. You know what it means? It means I can stand with boldness and say, God is a promise-keeping God. And because he kept his promise to them, he will keep his promise to us. I close with a reading in the New Testament from Luke 15. And I'm reading the story there of the prodigal son. In Luke 15, the scripture tells us about this prodigal son. Verse 11, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. Not many days after, the young man gathered all together, took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. Give me some return music. That's almost like saying, play something metacrational. He wasted his substance with riotous living. Folks, the word wasted is synonymous with prodigal. Prodigal means wasteful. He wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, oh, wait a minute, let me read that again. When he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father. Folks, notice this. He didn't say, I will arise and go to a location. I will arise and go to a house. He said, I'm going to go to a person. Wherever my father is, that's where I'm going. I will arise and go to my father and say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father, but when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion on him and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. You know what, folks? I'm not under the delusion that God is going to take away someone's free will and force them back to the church. But what I'm confident is as we begin to pray and God begins to pull some demonic opposition back away from people, they will be freed to come to themselves, to come back to their own right mind. And when they begin to walk through those doors and come back, I can promise you this, the Lord will welcome them with compassion, and the church will welcome them with compassion. We will stand with open arms. In fact, we'll run to meet them and hug them. He said, the son said unto him, Father, I've sinned against heaven. Verse 21, in thy sight, I'm no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. Oh Lord, he heard the church having a revival when the backslider prayed through, and he wasn't happy about all of it. Folks, if there's really anybody in all of my preaching tonight that you definitely don't want to emulate, it's the elder brother. I do want you to emulate him in being faithful, but don't emulate him in being angry against the return of the backslider. He called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. What's all this dancing in the aisles? What's all this running in the aisles? What's all this talking in tongues? What's going on here? I don't like the sound of it. I'm going to tell you, folks, whether the angry, bitter elder son likes the sound of it or not, the church likes the sound of it, and God likes the sound of it. And he, that is the servant, he said unto him, thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and he would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, lo, these many years do I serve thee, and neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, thou hast devoured thy living, and who has devoured thy living with harlots, and thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Everywhere out across the Ponderosa, that's all yours, son. You don't need to get upset and get your underwear all wadded up, because everything out there is yours. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. Let me summarize that last part by saying this. You don't have to wait till the prodigal gets home to dance in the aisles. You can have your own party anytime you want to. But I promise you, one day when you need to have a party is when the prodigal returns home. Folks, as this precious sister talked in tongues right here in this altar tonight, I jumped up and down and danced in my body and in my spirit, because the Lord is welcoming people home. Come help me, elder. If you would, put this offering plate on top of that one, and move this column right out in the middle. Folks, I want to ask you to stand, and I want to ask you to come forward. Matter of fact, I want to ask you to stand here, elder, and help me. Some of y'all probably have a pen. If you got a pen in your purse, ladies, bring it with you. My very first pastor, Bishop Clyde Self, once told me that a preacher without a pen is a rebel without a cause. Because in those days, if you were going to write down a preaching appointment, you didn't have a smartphone to put it in. You had to pull out your date calendar book, and you had to pencil it in. And if you didn't have a writing implement, you couldn't pencil in a preaching appointment. And to him, that was sheer folly. Now, folks, as you come, I want you to think of however many names that you want us to pray for in coming days. This can be lost souls who need salvation for the first time. It can be prodigals who need to return. It can be people that need healing over whatever disease. However many names you can think of, I want you to write them. I want you to write them on a card, and I want you to put them in here. One card, one name. If you got 3 names in mind, fill out 3 cards. Why? Because when we go to fetch that one person's name out because they prayed through, we want the other names to stay still being prayed for till they get here. Now, folks, I'm not talking French or Portuguese. Come on, now's the time. As you come up and get one of these. And if you've got your own pen, start filling it out. And if you need a pen, we got a few we can give you. Elders, come help us hand out cards. Wouldn't it be awesome? Wouldn't it be awesome if we just even ran out of cards tonight and had to go get some more? We're going to write for a while, and then we're going to put some stuff in the box, and then we're going to have a prayer meeting around this box, folks. Say, what good is that going to do? I'll tell you what good it's going to do. We're praying to a God who can say to the devil, no, you need to back off so this person can think straight again. Hallelujah. One name per card. One name per card. My pen stopped writing right in the middle of a name. I need a new pen. Yep. Not today, Satan. Yes. Folks, if you're running short of cards, rip one card in two, and that makes two cards out of it. As long as there's still enough room to write the name. Now, I want you to hear this, folks. When you put this card in there, you say it in Jesus' name. And I don't want you to return to your seat. Stay up here with us because we're going to pray over these. Brother Kyron, come give your testimony. Folks, I want you to listen to this testimony. We're fixing to pray. But before we pray, I want you to hear this testimony.
Brother Bud mentioned this earlier. The ASR National Rally that we went to in Maryville, Tennessee. When Brother Carpenter was preaching, he did this same thing. And, you know, this isn't a magic box that, you know, the pastor said, this isn't just going to bring people back. This forces your prayers to get serious. When I was there, I put 3 names in that box. And one of them is sitting behind that computer desk right there. Brother Jared, I love you, and I'm glad that you're back. Prayer is powerful, church. God works. Thank you, Jesus.
Still being raised, giants are still being slain. God, we believe, and yes, we can see that wonders are still what you do. We are here for you. Come and do what you do. We are here for you. Come and do what you do. We set our hearts on you. Come and do what
living on the streets underneath the bridge because he's on drugs. We had been praying and praying, and one day we was going through town, asked the Lord, please let him come appear somewhere so we know he's okay. We didn't see him that day, but the next week we were walking through the grocery store over in Adamston, and there was Timmy standing. And I said, thank you, Lord, because I know he's still alive. His name is in this container tonight because we're claiming him right now in Jesus' name.
Now, folks, you remember what the command of the people was in order for the walls to fall? It's not that you dance and shout and blow the trumpet after. You shout before. And I want to ask you to join me right now in shouting by faith even before, to demonstrate we know what God can do.
Miracles happen when you move. Healing is coming in this room. Miracles happen when you move. Heaven is coming, yes. Miracles happen when you move. Healing is coming in this room. Miracles happen when you move. Heaven is coming. Miracles happen when you move. Healing is coming in this room. Miracles happen when you move. Heaven is
Folks, I want everybody to notice, the location of this. Every service you come to pray, come up here and pray over these names. Not only the names you put in, pray over everybody else's names. Monday night for prayer, come and pray over these names. Wednesday night before church, pray over these names. Sunday morning before church, pray over these names. Sunday night before church, pray over these names. If you just come to drop off some chicken at the food pantry, come over here and pray over these names. Every time you think about it at home, pray over these names. In fact, let me ask you something. Some of you young people maybe, come and take a picture of this with your cell phone. Print out that picture and hang it on the mirror in your bathroom. Print out that picture and hang it on your refrigerator at home. Every time you go for a midnight snack, pray over these names. Now, folks, here's the thing. God does not have to promise to overrule anybody's free will to tell us what is going to happen on a trend level. And the Holy Ghost is speaking to us that there is going to be a return of prodigals. Not necessarily giving us specific names in His telling, but telling us a trend that's going to happen. And so it is that we understand. We don't know which name in here will be first, second, third, but we know we're going to start seeing some results. Because we are standing against the forces of evil in the life of somebody that's in this bowl. Let's give the Lord another shout of praise here tonight. Amen, amen, amen. Oh, hallelujah. Anybody else fired up? Anybody else feel like you renewed your strength from waiting on the Lord? Oh, hallelujah. Praise God. Thank you, Jesus. Lord, I pray quicken by your power. quicken by your power our hand to the work. Grant to us victory and success, I pray, in spiritual victory, spiritual matters. Grant to us, Lord, exercise of the gifts of the Spirit. Grant to us authority over all manner of sickness. Grant to us, Lord, power and authority over all manner of devils, because we speak in your name. Hallelujah. Praise. Turn to somebody near you and tell them, greater is he that is within me than he that is in the world. God bless you. God bless you. As we're dismissed, feel free to stay and pray as long as you like. Hallelujah. God bless you in Jesus' name. Please remember, tomorrow is the pro-life rally at the Capitol. If you can at all make it, please go to Charleston tomorrow to the Capitol and be with us for the pro-life rally.